God is dead. With just 3 words, Friedrich Nietzsche ignited one of the most misunderstood and misquoted ideas in the history of Western philosophy. But what did he really mean? Did Nietzsche truly believe in the literal death of a divine being? Was this a cold celebration of atheism, or a chilling warning of what happens when belief collapses and meaning evaporates? This quote echoes across classrooms, coffeehouses, TikTok videos, and even heavy metal lyrics. But like all things Nietzschean, it's much deeper and far more complex than it first appears. Today, we dive into the philosophical depths of God is dead, a phrase that wasn't meant to end a conversation, but to begin a cultural reckoning. Welcome to the unfolding journey, where we explore the ideas, philosophies, and questions that shape how we think, live, and see the world. If you're someone who craves depth in an age of surface-level scrolling, you're in the right place. Let's untangle this profound idea together and trace its ripples through modern life. The phrase God is dead appears most famously in 2 of Nietzsche's works. The Gay Science, 1882. Thus Spoke Zarathustra, 1883-85. In The Gay Science, Nietzsche tells the parable of a madman who runs through a marketplace with a lantern in broad daylight shouting, "I seek God! I seek God!" The crowd mocks him, atheists laughing at the idea of God, believers avoiding the awkwardness. The madman then delivers his unsettling message. God is dead. God remains dead. And we have killed him. This wasn't just blasphemy for shock value. Nietzsche wasn't simply talking about religion. He was confronting the cultural reality of Europe in the 19th century. Let's first clear up a common misconception. Nietzsche did not mean that God once existed, but was now physically deceased. Nor was he claiming personal victory for atheism. Instead, he was diagnosing a cultural and philosophical shift. The collapse of the traditional moral and metaphysical framework that had been rooted in Christianity for centuries. By Nietzsche's time, science, rationalism, and secularism were on the rise. Darwin's theory of evolution, the Enlightenment's push for reason, and a growing skepticism toward religious institutions were challenging centuries of theological dominance. Nietzsche saw this and asked, if belief in God dies, what happens to everything built upon that belief? Morality, meaning, purpose, hope. If God was the anchor for these values, what happens when the anchor is gone? That's why Nietzsche wasn't celebrating. He was issuing a warning. The rest of the madman's speech is rarely quoted, but incredibly important. What did we do when we unchained this earth from its sun? Where are we now? Are we not wandering through an infinite nothing? This is existential vertigo, the fear that, without God, we might fall into nihilism. Nietzsche believed that Christianity had provided the West with a structure, a cosmic order, a moral compass, a telos, or ultimate purpose. Without it, people risk drifting into relativism or despair. He wasn't arguing that God must exist, but rather that society hadn't yet reckoned with what losing God actually meant. Here's the paradox. Even after rejecting the divine, people often continued to cling to inherited moral values, what Nietzsche called the shadow of God. He criticized this inconsistency. If you no longer believe in the source, why keep the rules? In Thus Spoke Zarathustra, Nietzsche's prophetic text, he presents a possible response to the death of God, the creation of the Übermensch, the Overman or Superman. This is not a tyrant or a superhero. It's an ideal human being who can create values from within, who affirms life without relying on divine command or eternal reward. The Übermensch lives with authenticity, embraces suffering, and finds meaning through self-overcoming. So, if the death of God marks the end of imposed meaning, the Übermensch is the beginning of created meaning. Nietzsche feared that the immediate consequence of God's death would be nihilism, the belief that life has no meaning, no value, no direction. He predicted that this spiritual vacuum would lead to crisis, moral confusion, political extremism, deep existential dread. He even foresaw the 20th century's descent into ideologies and totalitarianism, where humans, desperate for meaning, latch onto nationalism, communism, fascism, or consumerism like new gods. Nietzsche's warning wasn't about religion per se. It was about the soul of civilization. So where does this leave us today? We live in a world where traditional faith has declined in much of the West. But Nietzsche's question still stands. Without a shared transcendent foundation, how do we define right and wrong? How do we live meaningfully without pretending that we still believe in the structures we've abandoned? Nietzsche doesn't give us easy answers, but he demands honesty. He challenges us to look inward, to confront the abyss without flinching, and to create values from our own depths. Let's bring this into the 21st century. Nietzsche's message is more relevant than ever. We live in an age of algorithm-driven opinions, instant gratification, political polarization, cultural fragmentation. His work forces us to ask, are we just swapping old gods for new ones? Money, fame, productivity? Are we willing to live without illusions, even if it means facing discomfort? Can we build a society not on inherited dogma, but on consciously chosen principles? Nietzsche might not offer peace, but he offers liberation, the courage to forge a path beyond tradition without slipping into chaos. So, was Nietzsche glad that God was dead? Not exactly. He was mourning, warning, and calling, mourning the loss of certainty, warning of the danger of nihilism, and calling for the birth of a new kind of humanity. His message isn't the end of belief, but the beginning of responsibility. We killed God, Nietzsche says. Now we must become worthy of that act. It's not about despair. It's about becoming creators in a world where nothing is given, but everything is possible. If this made you think deeper about Nietzsche, belief, or your own values, don't let the journey stop here. Hit that subscribe button, join us on the unfolding journey, and keep exploring the questions that shape who we are. Because philosophy isn't just in books, it's in your everyday choices, your struggles, your meaning. And we're just getting started.